welcome. Music Review Board of Portland Spotlight Series. I'm Jon Hitchcock here in Studio 3, beautiful downtown Portland. We're going to talk today specifically about the late 70s, early 80s music scene in Portland. I want to introduce Greg Shadoan right here. He is a bass player. We want to talk about what was happening back then and what's happening now, and so we're going to take it away.
1, 2, 3, 4. Preach about the city, razzle dazzle by the lights. Gonna be a rock singer if I take all my life. I'm running, crazy for a dollar. I'm running, crazy for a dollar. Saving up my money, mama, send it to you. It's red leather pants and the best shoes. I'm running, crazy for a dollar. I'm running.
Tell us about that scene back then. It was happening. It was so much different from what it is today. And not that today's scene is bad or lacking. It was just different, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was definitely different. There was a lot more of it. It seemed like everybody was in a band, that I knew at least. And I was young, so I think I was probably in 8th grade, a freshman in high school, when we started playing, playing out in bands and house parties, and then at some point or another, we would haunt all the music stores, and I met Fred down at Freedom Guitar, and that's how this whole thing started. Was they were auditioning a bass player for a band called The Weeds. The Weeds was a local band. They were from California, and anyway, I auditioned for the band and I failed miserably. But a year or so later, Fred called me and said, "Hey, I'm looking for a bass player. You want to start a band?" So that's how it started with the zipper thing. Now, you got to realize that I was 14 years old. I didn't have any world experience at all. I was just a kid, just a baby. And Jim and I were neighborhood friends. He went to a different high school, so it was weird. But we turned into friends, and we played together and kind of grew up playing together. And so Fred had this idea of starting a band, and he'd come up with the name. He came up with the music. He was the dad. He was the teacher. He'd been there, done that. He'd met Janis Joplin and Jimi Hendrix in real life, and been to the Monterey Festival, and had records out. So he was kind of our mentor. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of how it all started with us.
When was the switch flipped that you got into music and it really got into your blood?
It was the Beatles, to be honest with you. My sister had some 45 7-inch records, and it was the cool stuff of the day.
Yeah. And
that kind of turned the switch for me.
Yeah.
And then I started kind of thinking, wow, that sounds pretty good. I like that. And then I started hearing bands like Jimi Hendrix, and it was just blowing my mind, and all this, all that stuff just started seeping in. So it was, I'm pretty sure it was the 7th grade, I asked my parents for a guitar for Christmas. And I had an original Fred Meyers, Kalamazoo, which was Gibson.
Sure.
Electric guitar and tube amplifier I got for Christmas that year, and that's really kind of how I started it all. My friend Steve Hess, he got one too. So that's how we started. And how we started playing music was, that was it. That's all we knew. Yeah. Just make noise, and it was fun. And that's really was the trigger. I think it was, if you look back at it, it was the Beach Boys, it was the Beatles, and then started paying attention to loftier things like I said, Cream, Jimi Hendrix, other bands that really started. I go, wow, that's cool. I remember when I was a kid, it was one of my big dreams in life was to actually jam with Jimi Hendrix just once.
Yep. Yeah.
They died.
Do you remember when the Beatles came on Sullivan? Do you remember that night?
I don't.
Oh, I remember that like it was yesterday, I'll tell you what.
I don't think I was allowed to watch TV at that late hour.
Oh, really? Oh, well. I remember it like yesterday. I'll tell you what, I was 6 years old in '64, and that's kind of where it just took off from that point. It just
64,
took off.
What was I, 8? My big first impression was in the living room with my sister, playing 45s, and I think that's pretty cool stuff.
Yeah.
That was really.
And it was.
It was cool.
It endures.
And I knew that they were very popular and that the girls used to scream, and I said, that's for me.
Yep. Oh, I'll tell you what. Walk down memory lane right there.
Yeah.
So, Greg, tell us about the club scene and when you first broke in.
The club scene was completely different back in those days. The laws were, as you may know, were a lot more liberal in terms of the amount of alcohol one could and get away with it.
Yeah.
The drunken driving thing got to be pretty serious, and more people drunk and drive and killing people. It became a serious societal issue. But for me, the club scene didn't really happen. I was playing in other bands when I was playing clubs, more or less. Mm-hmm. And I also did sound for bands that were doing the club scene. It was 79 or so, I started doing sound seriously. I did sound for the Greg Smith Band, and we played every club in town 10 times a month. It seemed like it was horrible.
Did you ever play that D Street Chorale? Remember that?
I don't recall.
That was a hopping place back in the day.
I mean, I played with people who played there.
Yeah.
And there was a bunch of different, like I said, that was the dance hall scene.
Yeah.
It really wasn't a club scene in those days.
Okay.
So there was several rooms like the D Street Chorale. There was oh God, it's been so long. There was a Masonic temples type things, and then like the high schools and grade school even we would do, but those were paid gigs. And then Fred, being the entrepreneur that he was, because he would do his own promotion and marketing and rent the hall and hire the lighting guy and hire the extra bands that we were going to have, and then we would play, and we wouldn't make any money on those gigs, but there was a lot of that kind of stuff back in those days.
Mm-hmm. So when did Sequel start?
Zipper ended, I think, like I said, in 74, 75, maybe 76, I can't even remember, but it's a little blurry in my mind. But I remember that I had just gotten married, so that was in 79. And I think I'd probably met Greg Georgeson and Reed Douglas. I was playing with Reed Douglas in another band with Dave Moss, of all things, and Ellingsworth, the high voltage guy.
Oh, yeah.
Remember that guy?
I remember High Voltage.
So
sure.
He was kind of a promoter in those days as well.
Okay.
So this was, like I said, pre-club scene, more or less. And I was playing with Dave and Reed, and Reed is the one who actually brought me in for auditions for Sequel, and that was over at Jack Ely's house.
Oh, yeah, from the Kingsmen.
Yeah,
sure.
So I auditioned at Jack's house on his bass amp. It was fun. We had a great time, and Reed said, "No, you're in. Blah 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 blah. You got the job." And Greg and I never really got along. He was of a different class, shall we say. I was just a white trash punk kid from Northeast Portland. He grew up in his dad was a tax lawyer, and they had a 60,000 square foot house in West Hills, blah 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 blah. So there was a lot of tension with us, but Reed and I got along great, and we started the band with Laurie Urich, who was the drummer for Zipper as well. Mm-hmm. So Laurie and myself and Reed and Greg were I think we were probably like the second version. I think I saw Greg play a free thing at Denny's Music.
Okay.
We used to go in there all the time and get gear. It was so funny because Denny, he was one of the guys in this town who really made the music scene happen. Denny's Music, remember that?
Oh yeah.
So I mean,
he was a guitar teacher, wasn't he? I think he taught guitar.
He was all business with me. It was all,
okay.
What do you need, Greg? Jeez, you guys are back in here again wanting more PA gear for the weekend, blah blah blah. So we used to drive him insane. But that's where I think I saw them first, and Kevin Condra was in a band. It was a throw together jumbled piece of crap, and so anyway, I think this was kind of like their second version, was the first kind of real serious stab at it of doing originals, and we did a bunch of covers too. But then, actually, the way that first time ended up was Laurie and myself had a falling out. And I just quit. I just left, walked away, and then they found Todd. And
Todd Jensen,
Todd took the bass playing position, and it turns out he's a great singer too, which I couldn't sing to. I'd make frogs sick.
Yeah.
That's how I sing. So it was a good thing for them, and then so what happened was they got to be pretty big. Reed, and they also they got rid of Laurie at some point. Dave Lawrence was hired as the drummer, and then Ralph Fredrickson was brought in. So they had Reed and Ralph kind of doubling keyboards. Ralph would also play guitar. He could also play bass, and then sing like a bird. Reed, Ralph, Greg, and Todd all singing. It turned into a pretty good band. Yeah. Which the original sequel just didn't have that talent pool.
Okay.
It was one singer. It was Greg and Reed, and Reed squawked a little bit too. But I didn't sing. Laurie didn't sing. We didn't sing. We didn't care. But then they got to be pretty big, and that's kind of when the club scene started really getting big, with the Orange Peel and the Wreck of the Hesperus, and the couple clubs that were downtown. I can't remember the names of those things. They changed so often. The Orange Peel, the Wreck of the Hesperus were the two big rock clubs. One was out in, I think it was in kind of Beaverton area. The other one was out in East Portland. Yep. And those clubs both died, immediate deaths after the alcohol thing went in. Sure. So what happened? The evolution of Sequel was that I was just in the band maybe 6 or 8 months, something like that, and I left. Okay. So then they got really big, and they decided that, in fact, one of the people I work for, actually I had tried to get them signed, and so they moved to LA, and they started doing record company, AR, relationship building, and I think they might have gotten signed, but it just turned to crap on them, and they all moved back home. I don't know what happened. Well, that's kind of the gist of it.
Yeah, that's kind of the story I got. Todd Jensen, right, the bass player, he went on to play
with Alice. Went on to do big
Alice
things.
Cooper, yeah.
He went on to play with Alice and Ozzy and Neil Schon, and I mean, he's done amazing works. He's an excellent player, and he's a very good singer. Mm-hmm. So what happened next was that first, the big successful Sequel went to LA, came back home, they broke up, they all went their separate ways, and at that point, Grant was in the band when they'd gone down there.
Grant Rohold, yeah.
And then somehow or not, I think I was playing with Monty Admonson of all people. The Blue Binos, you ever heard of those guys?
I don't think so.
So anyway, it was a little blues band deal, and I think we were down at it's called the Whiskey Bar now, but it was Tony's Club. I can't remember the name of it. Down on 2nd Avenue, right there under the Burnside Bridge, big club. And we were in there playing. Me and Bud, and Monty, and Greg was there, out of the blue.
Wow.
And so I said, "Oh, hey, how you doing? Good to see you." Blah blah blah. And he goes, "Yeah, we're putting the band back together." I said, "Oh, really?"
Now, what year was this? How long?
So this is going to be 78 or 79.
Oh, okay.
Because I had just gotten married, had my first child. So I go, "Yeah, that sounds interesting." I was kind of on the outs with Monty anyway. He was, at the time, he was having issues with substance abuses. Wasn't a big fan of that, never have been. Yeah. So I gave Greg another shot, and he got Dave Wall and Grant. That was the band, so it was the four of us, and we went on to do a lot of gigs. Wreck of the Hesperus, Orange Peel, blah 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 blah, that whole circuit. And I think that was probably about a year and a half deal. And then Todd moved back to town. He wanted his job back, so they gave it to him.
Okay. So Greg, tell us about the punk scene, specifically in Portland. You know, if you were involved in that or
I kind of was peripherally. I was the weird kid, I had the long hair, and all the punk kids were, shaved heads and whatnots, and I never really fit in with their scene. So I really wasn't a punk kid per se. In fact, my main exposure to them was with Fred initially. When Zipper broke up, Fred, Laurie, and myself were in a little band called Zap Spangler. And so that was kind of Fred's first guitar band that he actually stood up and played guitar in, and he wasn't very good at it. And that was kind of the trick of it. It was the smoke and mirrors of punk. If you sucked at playing music, you were a good punk band. Yeah. It's kind of how it worked. Yeah. And I hate to say it, because all those guys are my friends. I love them. I adore them.
Sure.
But Fred kind of pigeonholed himself into that mode because he couldn't play for his shit. I mean, we were used to having Jim Roos playing guitar. He was a master.
Sure.
And then we go to this guy who can barely, do 3 chords.
Yeah.
And he did the same chords over and over again. It was hilarious. So that was kind of, and so
Punk era.
we got into that scene a little bit, and it wasn't very well accepted. I had long hair. They hated that. They hated Rickenbackers. They hated all the stuff that I could play, and Laurie and I could actually play music. So that kind of screwed us out of the punk scene in earnest. then I started playing with some old high school buddies of mine, Billy Rancher and Pete Jorgensen.
Oh, the Unreal Gods, yeah.
Well, this was pre-Unreal Gods.
Yeah, but I remember Billy Rancher.
It was Lenny and Billy, the Rancher brothers, and Pete Jorgensen on drums and myself. Wow. And that was a band that was called the Malchicks.
Okay.
So that was kind of my other thing into the punk rock deal, was because they kind of sucked too at the time. They were just kids. I mean, I had this great backup. Building blocks that Fred gave us.
Yeah.
To what to do, how to do it.
Yeah.
Practice. I mean,
Sure.
he was a stern master, shall we say, and so we got pretty good. But it was. So anyway, getting back to the Malchicks thing, that was a delight. Those guys were great. And then they went on. I just kind of lost interest in it, I guess is what you could say. It wasn't really anything that I had. I adore those guys, don't get me wrong. But Billy was fantastic. I enjoyed all the minutes that I had with him. And
yeah.
And then I started playing with my Lauren Lee and Dennis Winslow band. After the Malchicks. They were a little bit more learned, a little bit more experienced, and that kind of switched that. But they were kind of a punk band too, frankly, kind of a pop punk.
So that was really the club scene, though. That was in the club scene. You're no longer in the days of dance halls.
We weren't doing dance halls back in those days. I think the dance hall days were over, probably 77-ish time frame. It just got old.
Right.
And, people spend more money when they're drunk.
Sure.
I mean, that wasn't rocket science.
Right.
So we knew if you want to make money, you go to where they're drinking.
Yeah, that's right. So we're going to break away for a quick commercial. We've got to pay some bills, and we got a real special guest coming up. So stick with us.
Sunny afternoons going for a drive, loving the scenery, go the extra mile. Not the same places, but the same feelings. I've never been more alive, but I feel like I'm dreaming. You still own my eyes.
Hey friends, hey neighbors, this is Jon Hitchcock from the Music Review Board of Portland, here at the Roseland Theater during their remodeling phase in beautiful downtown Portland, Oregon. Be sure to check out our new Spotlight series on Facebook. Look for us at the Music Review Board of Portland, and if you are a songwriter and would like to participate in the Spotlight series, just message us at Facebook Messenger. Thank you.
I like the way you move and the way you laugh, the little things you do and the way you shake your ass. I've been on my phone with my mom all night long. The electric went out and she couldn't stay calm. I would never miss a day if your skin grew soft and your hair turned gray.
What was that thing you did that? Okay. Hey, welcome back to the Music Review Board of Portland Spotlight Series. We're back with a couple of fun guys, and we bring in Jim Roos. Welcome.
So Jim and I, actually, like I said earlier, we grew up together. We went to different high schools, but we were kind of in the same neighborhood.
Yeah.
And when Fred said, I need some musicians to, because we had tried some other guys, and oh my God, it was such a disaster. It was a dumpster fire band from one after another. So he said, God, Greg, do you know anybody who plays? And I go, yeah, I know these couple of guys. Jim Roos plays guitar. He plays pretty good. And then Laurie, he's a pretty good drummer. Jim and Laurie didn't get along very well, who's recently passed, by the way. Rest in peace, Laurie. But I was able to kind of keep them apart, keep them separated.
It was odd because you're right about us not getting along, but I always liked and admired Laurie.
Yep.
I don't know where that friction came from.
Well, I think it came from him, honestly, if you want my 30 years out opinion.
Well, I was not exactly a
You were both dicks.
saintly child. There you go.
You're both dicks.
I would talk about the other side of the...
Yeah.
They call myself an asshole, I guess.
So we played in Zipper together, but we've also done other things. We played in a band called, what was that, with Lauren and Dave?
The Urge.
The Urge, that's right. That was before Stu Ham had his band, The Urge.
So what year are we talking here?
I'm going to want to say in the early 90s.
Okay.
91 through maybe 92, 93 time frame.
Okay.
And that was with Lauren Lee. He was with the Snapperheads and the Secrets band with Dennis Winslow I talked about earlier. And Dave Lawrence was the drummer, who's, again, one of the sequel players. Mm-hmm. And then Jim and myself. And that was, we did some club work.
I really enjoyed that band.
Yeah, it was great fun.
We did pretty much all original music. And I found that through my life, Greg has been the best compatriot for writing original music. He was always very supportive, throw in great ideas, and it seems like everything else I did was a copy band, but when we got together, and I thought we did some great stuff in The Urge. I really liked
Fred was that way too. Fred kind of showed me how that worked, what the mechanics of writing was. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of why it carried on for all of us, I think.
Yeah, I liked writing with Fred too.
Yeah.
So where would I find your material? Is it anything on the internet? Is there anything on YouTube?
No, there's stuff on YouTube.
Okay.
But it's not video. It's just audio tracks. You can search for Zipper, the band, or whatever. You'll see a lot of Squirrel Nut Zippers come up.
Okay. Yeah.
But we were never big in the U.S.
Okay.
Europe, on the other hand, is a totally different animal.
Interesting. Yeah. Talk about that a little bit.
There was a time when we could have hit really big.
Okay.
What happened was that Dead Moon got to be pretty big in Europe.
Yep.
And it's kind of funny they did, because a lot of that was because of Zipper.
Okay.
In fact, we were doing a show in Greece, some club in, I don't know, Thessaloniki or someplace like that. And we came into the load-in. The club was playing Zipper record.
Wow.
And they wouldn't stop playing it.
Isn't it?
Over and over and over again. And I asked the club owner, I go, why do you guys play the Zipper record? Well, that's why we booked Dead Moon, it's because of Zipper.
Wow. That's funny.
All day. But there was another interesting Zipper story that I don't think I've told any of you. I might have told you. I did sound for one of the bigger clubs in town for quite some time. And I was doing monitors one day, and to me, show is a show. I don't care. It all kind of runs together. I don't even know who it was playing, doing input lists, doing mic checks, blah, 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 blah. So the band comes on stage, and there's this guy yelling across the stage. He goes, "You're Greg Shadoan." I went, what do I owe this guy money or something? I don't know. And I go, yeah. And he goes, from Zipper, right? And I went, oh, shit, yeah. And he goes, just so you know, if that wasn't for that record, Pantera would never have existed.
Wow.
It turns out it was Phil Osmano or whatever his name is.
Wow. Yeah.
We were all just like, I was stunned.
Wow. How about that?
But that's another
huge.
It's another story.
That's huge.
But so Jim and I, after the Zipper thing, we kind of had a falling out too, a little bit.
I suppose.
It got frustrating because what happened was that it was just at the ebb and flow, at the end of this dance hall scene, and people were starting to go out to clubs. We hadn't got there. We were still trying to do the dance hall thing with Zipper. We had the one record out, and we'd actually recorded a second record.
There were at least a few songs, I know that.
Well, there was 2 tapes. I know that for sure. It was some studio out in, I can't remember where it was, but it was a really great studio.
Yeah.
But they lost one of the tapes. The other tape, I don't know if it's any good or not. Who knows? The music wasn't that great. I guess we all just kind of dissolved. That was the end of Zipper. And then, so we kind of, that's where Fred and Laurie and I started playing with Zap Spangler, because Jim just didn't want to have anything to do with it anymore. And he'd been evolving anyway, and he started playing R&B and some pretty good bands.
I really wanted to do the R&B stuff. I was getting tired of the rock stuff. And,
the metal.
I had a band of my own called Stratus, and I did I sat in for Rick Alarno and the Greg Smith Band, and
Yep.
I did a lot of gigs with those. That was really a hoot. Liked that a lot.
Stratus was a big band, and that was kind of my segue was that was really a club band,
That was a club band.
and the disco era was coming out too.
Yeah.
You were mentioning Billy Rancher. Bill Flatchel
Yep.
was the drummer in Stratus.
That's
who
right. He-
Eventually went to play
on Real
with
Gods.
Billy Rancher and Real Gods.
Yeah.
And Mark Stoll was also in that band.
So he played with
No Ties.
No Ties, yeah. Keyboard player.
Yes.
Good entertainer.
A great entertainer.
Really nice guy.
Great
too.
guy,
Yes.
too, yeah.
Yes.
Nicest guys you'll ever want to
Yep.
meet. Such a sweetie.
Yeah.
He was.
It was such a good scene back then,
Yeah.
guys. But cutting my teeth in the late '70s, early '80s. I mean, it's so different now. Why do you think? What happened? Why do you think, other than the '08 and with the legal?
That was nothing. That's not had
Well, yeah,
nothing to do with what music is.
Well, it had a lot to do with the clubs.
It had a lot to do with killing that scene.
killing the scene. Because club owners were hit with a higher liability insurance.
Yeah, it was ridiculous. They just all closed up.
They did.
Overnight.
And they fired the bands. They went to whatever it was. Now it's DJ. Now it's karaoke. Talk about that a little bit. Well, how do you think today's music is being stifled?
Jim's pretty much nailed it on the head. What a lot of popular music is these days. You got a MC and you got a DJ, and then this whole EDM thing with basically it's a guy playing a laptop. Very popular genre. Just something that I cannot really wrap my head around. Being a musician growing up and playing in bands with other, a band is kind of like a family.
Sure it is.
And, that was part of one of the reasons I think that we might have been drawn to that whole thing of being in a band. We wanted a secondary family. We wanted to feel
Part of something. Yep.
But the 90s, the early grunge era, that was a big deal too. Like Nirvana, they used to play at Satyricon with Fred and Tootie and those guys, and they all kind of knew each other. Soundgarden, Pearl Jam, all those guys. They were just club bands. They were just playing little shithole clubs like Satyricon and little clubs in Seattle or whatever. And then that whole thing just blew up.
Yeah.
It got a lot of traction.
Huge.
And now it's kind of waned, just like the metal did, just like the pop rock, just like punk.
Yep.
Punk's dead, you're next, the old saying.
After the grunge thing happened, there's nothing that's really seems to me that has taken off.
Yeah. Right.
Right. Band-wise.
Yeah.
Certainly, we have individual entertainers, but not a lot. Maybe we got some boy bands that the teenagers go for, and things like that.
It just seems to me that, and I don't want to say, the Kurt Cobain thing, it ended
that was
with
sad.
him, but that was definitely an unplugged spot, I think.
He was awesome.
Yeah, he was somebody that once in a lifetime.
Yeah.
At the time when he passed, I read reviews about, he was, people were comparing him with John Lennon, and I thought, oh, wait a minute. But as time's gone on, yeah, I can see that comparison now. I've had John Lennon on a tall pedestal all my life.
I never really did. The funny thing about it was I thought the Beatles were kind of a pop band. I didn't really think that they were that skilled of musicians until like Sgt. Pepper came out.
Oh,
Right.
And that's when I went, okay.
Well, they were a pop band in the beginning.
They were. They
I think
totally were.
they developed into what they are now.
I mean, guys like Jimi
Huge.
Hendrix was
Hendrix, man.
far more technical and interesting to me than the
Hendrix.
Beatles were. I mean,
We could do a whole hour on Hendrix.
easy.
But
But Sgt. Pepper was really, okay, they know what they're doing.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
This guy can do that with 4 tracks, I'm impressed.
oh yeah. With Cobain, I think it was the end of an era.
Well, there's a lot of bands out there. I think one of the genres that's going to be popular coming up is going to be Americana, of all things. Kind of folk country almost. Crossover rock country thing is going to be a big thing. And that's one of the things I admire about Howie, is that he's got that, he's tuned into that.
Oh yeah. So Jim, talk about your influences and your take on the music scene.
Well, Jimmy Page was probably my biggest influence. I loved Led Zeppelin. And then I got into a lot of the guitar players like Joe Satriani, Jeff Beck, the sort of fusion jazz stuff that
The
I
overachievers.
got into. You could call it that, I guess.
Getting away from the 3-chord thing.
Yes.
Yeah, way away, yeah.
And eventually, you know, I always seemed to fall out of bands, and it wasn't until later in life that I actually figured out what the key to being successful and staying in bands was, and that's to focus on having fun.
Yeah.
There's so much that
huge.
could go on.
Yeah.
You worry about the pictures and videos and all this other stuff, but there is, if you go out and you play and you always have fun,
Yeah.
that's infectious. The audience is going to pick up on that,
Yeah.
and they're going to have fun, and you will become more and more popular. That's what's important.
Yeah.
And I also, we were talking about writing music, and I think that it's very important that you're your own worst critic, and you should like what you do. If you like it, it's good, and don't let anybody else tell you that something isn't right. You should just follow your own instincts. I wish I would have learned that when I was a lot younger.
You know, and that's a good thing to learn. Not overthinking yourself and not being too self-critical. I think those are things that can help you fail as well.
Well, and I have to say about that, that's why I love playing in bands, is because other players would always throw their influence on your original music, and it would always turn out better than if you just did it by yourself, in my opinion.
But having fun, that's
Yeah,
huge.
that's
It's
big.
the key.
I remember my dad told me that year, he played in the 40s and 50s, and he told me that early on. He says, if it isn't fun, move on. You're doing something wrong or it isn't happening, have fun with it.
I think that's true with any job.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Any job.
Once you start looking at music as a professional
Yeah.
endeavor and say, I got to play these same notes for this one guy, and I got to move to the next tour and play those notes for those other guys, and then I get my paycheck.
Have you ever been in a situation, I know I too many times, we played at Jubit's many times, and the set list, and you see a song coming, I was like, oh God, that song again.
Totally.
Oh.
I don't think there's anybody that's ever been in a band on the planet who doesn't dread Mustang Sal.
Yeah.
No offense.
Yeah, no offense to Mustang
offense to
Sally,
Craig
but
Clearwater, whoever wrote it, I don't even
right.
know.
And you just looked at so something's wrong there, you know.
Freebird, just another one.
Freebird was another one. Oh, God.
Yeah, it was.
Thank God Stairway to Heaven was too hard to sing.
Yeah.
I won't even play anymore unless it's fun. If it's not fun for me every minute, I don't fuck it.
Yeah.
I got no time for this.
Right.
I really don't.
Well, you got to commute. You got to set up. Load in, set up, play, tear down, commute back. Yeah, if it's. Yeah.
It's a lot of work.
It's a lot of
lot of
work.
work.
And we're not young anymore. So yeah, I'm with you.
Who are you
100%
talking
there.
to?
Music Review Board of Portland Spotlight Series. I want to thank these guys for coming out. Greg Shadoan and Jim Roos, thank you very much for coming out and shining some light on the 70s and the 80s and beyond.
Thanks for having us.
Well, yeah, man.
It's been a pleasure.
I think Jim and I are both surprised anybody wants to know.
Portland's got a rich history of live music. It was a great scene, and it is a great scene. And giving props to the newer people out there. We want to hear them. We want to have them on this show. We want to have this series be in a positive light. And you guys have brought that positive light to this, and we thank you very much for coming out. Thank you. So, having said that, we're going to see you again next time. This is Jon Hitchcock, Studio 3, beautiful downtown Portland. We'll see you next time. Good night.